The moment I dropped my wedding ring into the chocolate fountain at the Harbor Bay Yacht Club, I knew there was no going back. The platinum band made a satisfying plop as it disappeared into the swirling dark cascade, and the entire room went silent like someone had just announced the apocalypse. My name is Eddie Masters, and I used to be funny for a living. Stand-up comedy in Boston clubs, making people laugh at my self-deprecating jokes about being married to a woman way out of my league. Now, I fix boats for rich people who treat me like I'm invisible. Funny how life works out. "Eddie, what the hell are you doing?" Vanessa hissed, her perfectly manicured fingers digging into my arm like talons. She looked stunning in her black cocktail dress, the one that cost more than most people's rent. Everything about my wife screamed success. The highlighted blonde hair, the designer shoes, the marketing executive confidence that could sell ice to Eskimos. "Just making a statement," I said, loud enough for the crowd of yacht club members to hear. "Since you told Blake here that I'm too clingy and make you seem off limits, I figured I'd help you out." Blake Rourke stood there with his mouth hanging open, his Tesla keys dangling from his fingers like some kind of status symbol. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, muscular, successful real estate developer with a jaw that could cut glass. The kind of guy who probably never told a joke that didn't involve someone else's misfortune. "You're embarrassing me," Vanessa whispered, but her face was flushed with something that wasn't embarrassment. Excitement, maybe, like this was exactly the kind of drama she'd been craving. Mrs. Hawkins, our 70-something neighbor who saw everything from her front porch, caught my eye from across the room. She nodded slightly, like she approved of what I'd just done. That old woman had been watching Vanessa's comings and goings for months, and I had a feeling she knew more than she let on. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to the room, raising my glass of overpriced wine, "my wife is officially available for whatever consulting services she provides. Real estate development seems to be her specialty these days." The crowd murmured and shifted uncomfortably. Lila, Vanessa's best friend and office gossip queen, stared at me with wide eyes. Mark, her co-worker who followed her around like a lost puppy, smirked like he was enjoying the show. Blake cleared his throat. "Eddie, maybe we should talk about this privately." "Oh, we will," I said, meeting his eyes. "We definitely will." As Vanessa grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the exit, I caught sight of the chocolate fountain. My wedding ring was somewhere in that mess, probably being coated in layers of artificial sweetness. It seemed fitting somehow. The ride home was silent, except for the sound of Vanessa's breathing, which got sharper and more agitated with each mile. Our Victorian house looked tired in the moonlight, its paint peeling and shutters slightly crooked. It used to feel like home. Now it felt like a stage set for a play that had run too long. "You've lost your mind," she finally said as we pulled into the driveway. "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe I finally found it." 3 days later, Vanessa left her work phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. She'd been carrying 2 phones for months, claiming her boss required it for client confidentiality. I'd always been suspicious of people who needed that much privacy. The phone buzzed with a text message. The preview showed Blake's name and the words, "Can't wait for tonight, beautiful." My hands were steady as I scrolled through their conversation history. Months of messages, photos I didn't want to see, and a shared calendar that showed meetings at times when Vanessa had told me she was working late or having girls' nights with Lila. The shower was still running upstairs. Steam was probably fogging up the bathroom mirror, hiding Vanessa's reflection just like she'd been hiding the truth. I took photos of everything with my own phone, methodically documenting each message, each lie, each betrayal. When she came downstairs in her silk robe, hair wrapped in a towel, she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. Before the promotions, and the designer clothes, and the friends who treated me like I was something she'd stepped in. "Coffee's ready," I said, holding out her favorite mug. She smiled and kissed my cheek, her skin still warm from the shower. "You're sweet. I've got an early meeting today, so I'll probably be home late again." "With Blake?" The mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the kitchen tile. Coffee splashed across the white cabinets and pooled around our feet. "What did you say?" I held up her phone. "You left this downstairs. Blake seems very excited about tonight. Should I ask what kind of consulting you'll be doing, or can I guess?" Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, guilt, anger, and finally, defiance. "You went through my phone?" "That's a violation of privacy, Eddie." "Privacy?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're my wife. We don't have privacy from each other, or at least we're not supposed to." "It's not what you think." "Really?" "Because I think you've been sleeping with Blake Rourke for at least 4 months. I think you've been lying to me about working late, about girls' nights, about client meetings. I think you've been using our marriage as cover while you play house with a guy who drives a Tesla and probably has never worked with his hands in his life." She wrapped her robe tighter around herself. "You don't understand. Blake and I have a connection. He appreciates me in ways that you never could. I'm sure he does. Especially the way you appreciate his bank account." "That's not fair." "Fair." I stepped closer, crunching broken ceramic under my work boots. "You want to talk about fair?" Fair would have been telling me you weren't happy instead of sneaking around behind my back. Fair would have been asking for a divorce instead of making me look like a fool in front of the whole town. "I never meant for you to find out this way." "But you meant for me to find out eventually? Or were you just going to keep lying until you figured out how to trade up permanently?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Get dressed," I said. "You've got a meeting to get to." Wouldn't want to keep Blake waiting. As she headed upstairs, I swept up the broken mug and mopped up the coffee. The kitchen looked normal again, but something had fundamentally changed. The man who'd been making excuses for his wife's behavior, who'd been blaming himself for her distance, who'd been trying harder to win back her attention, that man was gone. In his place was someone who understood that sometimes the only way to win a rigged game was to change the rules. I'd always been good with my hands. 20 years of fixing boat engines had taught me about GPS systems, tracking devices, and the kind of small electronics that rich people use to keep tabs on their expensive toys. It took me less than an hour to install a magnetic GPS tracker under Vanessa's BMW. The device was smaller than a deck of cards and completely invisible once attached to the underside of her car. I could track her movements from my phone, see exactly where she went and how long she stayed. It felt like cheating, but then again, so did adultery. Richie, my co-worker at the marina, found me in the workshop that afternoon, staring at my phone screen while I pretended to rebuild a carburetor. "You look like someone ran over your dog," he said, settling his bulk onto a nearby stool. Richie was built like a refrigerator and had the social awareness of a brick, but he was loyal and honest, which made him better company than most people I knew. "Worse," I said. "Someone's been running around on my wife." "Vanessa? No way, man. She's got too much class for that." I showed him the phone, with its little red dot indicating Vanessa's location at Blake's condo complex. She told me she was having lunch with Lila. Lila works downtown. Blake lives in Harbor Heights. Richie squinted at the screen. "Maybe she's looking at real estate?" "Yeah, maybe she's looking at his bedroom." "Aw, shit, Eddie. I'm sorry, man. That's rough. It gets better." I found months of text messages. They've been planning trips together, talking about their future, making jokes about what a loser her husband is. What are you gonna do? That was the question, wasn't it? The old Eddie would have confronted her, demanded explanations, maybe suggested marriage counseling. The old Eddie would have tried to win her back, would have promised to change, would have blamed himself for driving her away. But the old Eddie was an idiot. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who they're dealing with," I said. That evening, I drove to Murphy's, the dive bar where working people went to drink away their problems. The place smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams, but the beer was cheap, and Barb, the bartender, knew everything that happened in town. "Eddie Masters," she said, as I settled onto a bar stool. You look like hell warmed over. Feel worse than I look. She poured me a beer without asking what I wanted. Barb had been tending bar for 30 years and could read people like a book. Trouble at home? You could say that. What do you know about Blake Rourke? Her expression darkened. Real estate developer. Thinks he's God's gift to women. Why? He's been developing something that belongs to me. Barb leaned across the bar, lowering her voice. I've seen him in here a few times with different women. Always married women, always acting like he's doing them some kind of favor. Last month it was Janet Morrison, the week before that it was someone I didn't recognize. What about my wife? She nodded grimly. Saw them together 2 weeks ago. They weren't talking business, if you know what I mean. I finished my beer and left a 20 on the bar. Thanks, Barb. You're a good friend. Eddie, she called as I headed for the door. Whatever you're planning, be smart about it. Men like Blake Rourke have lawyers and connections. Men like us just have our wits. Don't worry, I said. I'm feeling very witty lately. The next morning, I followed Blake's Tesla to the Marriott downtown. My GPS tracker showed Vanessa's car was already there, which meant they'd coordinated their arrival times. Professional cheaters, apparently. I parked across the street and watched Blake swagger into the hotel lobby like he owned the place. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, and he moved with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. That was about to change. I waited until they'd been inside for an hour before I made my move. Blake's Tesla was parked in a handicapped space, because of course it was. Men like him believed rules were for other people. The knife I used to slash his tires was the same one I used to cut marine rope at work. Sharp, efficient, and completely untraceable. I methodically punctured all 4 tires, enjoying the hissing sound as expensive air escaped into the atmosphere. Then I left a note under his windshield wiper. Stay away from what isn't yours. This is your only warning. I was back at work when my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Someone vandalized Blake's car at the hotel. Can you believe some people? I texted back, terrible. Some people have no respect for other people's property. She responded with a crying, laughing emoji like we were sharing a joke. If she only knew. That afternoon, Blake showed up at the marina. I was working on a yacht engine when I heard his voice asking someone where he could find Eddie Masters. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked out to meet him. You must be Blake, I said. I've heard so much about you. He was bigger than he'd looked from a distance, but he had soft hands and the kind of tan that came from golf courses, not real work. We need to talk. Sure. What about? You know what about. The tires, the note. This has to stop. I looked around the marina, at the expensive boats and the rich people who owned them. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Did someone damage your car? That's terrible. You should call the police. The police can't prove anything, and we both know it. Then I guess you don't have anything to worry about. He stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his size. Stay away from me and Vanessa. Your marriage is over, whether you accept it or not. You know what's funny? I said. I used to be a comedian. Want to hear a joke? Not particularly. A real estate developer, a cheating wife, and a boat mechanic walk into a bar. The developer thinks he's untouchable, the wife thinks she's clever, and the mechanic thinks he's got nothing left to lose. Guess which one was right? Blake's face reddened. Are you threatening me? Just telling jokes, though I guess the punchline hasn't landed yet. He stood there for a moment, probably trying to decide whether to take a swing at me or call his lawyer. Finally, he turned and walked away, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Richie appeared at my elbow. That the guy? That's him. He looks like he moisturizes. Probably uses the expensive stuff too. You want me to have a talk with him? I can be very persuasive. Thanks, but this is my problem. Besides, I've got a better idea. What's that? I'm going to let him destroy himself. Sometimes the best revenge is just giving people enough rope. And if that doesn't work? I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Then I'll help him tie the knot. Lila worked at the same marketing agency as Vanessa, in one of those open concept offices with glass walls and no privacy. She was the kind of woman who lived for drama and gossip, which made her the perfect weapon for what I had in mind. I'd done my research. Lila had been passed over for promotion twice, while Vanessa moved up the corporate ladder. She smiled and played the supportive friend, but I could see the resentment in her eyes whenever Vanessa talked about her success. The anonymous email I sent to Lila contained photos of the text messages between Vanessa and Blake, along with a note, "Thought you should know what your best friend really thinks about office relationships. Check the message from last Tuesday about desperate women who throw themselves at successful men." I doctored that particular message, but only slightly. Vanessa had actually called someone desperate. I just changed the context to make it look like she was talking about Lila. The beauty of the plan was that I didn't have to do anything else. Lila's wounded pride and jealousy would take care of the rest. I was replacing spark plugs on a cabin cruiser when my phone buzzed with a call from Vanessa. "Eddie, something terrible happened at work today." "What's wrong?" "Someone leaked information about Blake and me to the office. Everyone knows. My boss called me into his office. HR wants to meet with me tomorrow, and Lila won't even look at me." "That's awful," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "Do you have any idea who would do something like that?" "It had to be someone with access to my phone. Someone who knew about the messages." "Well, I hope you figure it out. Office drama can be really damaging to a career." There was a long pause. "Eddie, did I what?" "Nothing. Never mind. I'll handle this myself." "I'm sure you will. You're very good at handling things." After she hung up, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The first domino had fallen, and the others would follow naturally. Vanessa's perfect professional image was cracking, and once that happened, everything else would crumble. Richie found me grinning at my phone. "Good news?" "The best. Turns out my wife's having some trouble at work." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that happens when people find out you've been mixing business with pleasure." "You did something, didn't you?" "I just shared some information with someone who could appreciate it. What happened after that was completely out of my control." "You're getting scary, Eddie." "I like it." That evening, Vanessa came home looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was disheveled, and her hands were shaking as she poured herself a glass of wine. "Rough day?" I asked. "The worst. Everyone in the office is talking about me." Lila told everyone that I called her desperate and pathetic. She showed people the text messages, made it look like I was bragging about the affair. "Were you bragging?" She shot me a look that could have melted steel. "This isn't funny, Eddie. My career is in ruins. My reputation is destroyed. And Blake isn't returning my calls. Maybe he's busy. Didn't you say he had a big real estate deal coming up? How did you know about that?" "You mentioned it. Or maybe Blake did, at the yacht club." She stared at me suspiciously, but I kept my expression neutral. Let her wonder. Let her start questioning everything and everyone around her. "I think I'll sleep in the guest room tonight," she said. "I need space to think." "Whatever you need. I'll be in the workshop if you want to talk." But I wouldn't be in the workshop. I'd be making a few phone calls to some of Blake's potential clients, sharing some interesting information about his character and judgment. After all, would you really want to do business with a man who had affairs with his clients' wives? The second domino was about to fall. The Harbor Bay Yacht Club's monthly mixer was the social event where reputations were made and destroyed. I'd never paid much attention to the gossip and social politics before, but now I understood their power. In a small town like ours, reputation was everything. I arrived early and positioned myself near the bar, where I could observe without being obvious about it. Mrs. Hawkins was there, dressed in her best pearls and holding court with the other longtime members. She caught my eye and nodded approvingly. Vanessa arrived with Blake, both of them trying to project confidence despite the rumors that had been circulating all week. She was wearing a red dress that probably cost a fortune, but she looked uncomfortable, like she was wearing a costume that didn't quite fit. Blake glad-handed his way through the crowd, but I noticed that several people turned away when he approached. Word travels fast in small towns, especially when it involves sex and betrayal. "Eddie?" Mark appeared at my elbow, holding a martini and wearing a smug expression. "Fancy seeing you here?" "I thought you might be staying home these days." Mark had always been a weasel, the kind of guy who sucked up to anyone with power and kicked down at anyone without it. He'd been sniffing around Vanessa for years, probably hoping to catch her on the rebound. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. "These events are always so entertaining." "I bet they are, especially lately. I heard Vanessa's been having some trouble at work." "Nothing she can't handle. She's very resourceful." "Oh, I know. We've been working very closely together on the Morrison account." Very closely. There was something in his tone that made me pay attention. "Really? How closely?" "Let's just say I've been very supportive during her difficult time. A shoulder to cry on, you might say. The little weasel was making a move on my wife while she was vulnerable. Under normal circumstances, that might have bothered me. Now it just gave me more ammunition." "That's very kind of you, Mark. I'm sure she appreciates having such a good friend." "We're very good friends. In fact, we've been discussing her future career options. I might be able to help her land somewhere soft when this whole mess blows over." "For a price, I'm sure." He grinned. "Everything has a price, Eddie, even friendship." I excused myself and made my way across the room to where Blake was holding court with a group of potential investors. He was in full sales mode, talking about waterfront development opportunities and guaranteed returns. "Blake," I said, interrupting his pitch, "could I have a word?" The investors looked uncomfortable as Blake's face darkened. "I'm in the middle of a business discussion, Eddie." "This is business too. I think these gentlemen would be interested to know about your approach to client relations." "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken of his Tesla parked outside the Marriott. "I'm talking about your habit of mixing business with pleasure. These investors should know that when you say you'll take care of their wives' real estate needs, you really mean it." The group of men exchanged glances. One of them, a silver-haired man I recognized as the owner of the largest construction company in town, stepped forward. "Is this true, Blake? Are you having an affair with a client's wife?" "It's not what it looks like." "It looks like you're sleeping with married women and calling it business," I said, "which raises some interesting questions about your professional judgment and ethics." The silver-haired man shook his head. "I think we've heard enough. Gentlemen, let's discuss this project with someone else." As the group walked away, Blake grabbed my arm. "You son of a bitch. Do you have any idea what you just cost me?" "About $2 million, I'd guess. But hey, at least you've got your integrity." "This isn't over. You're right. It's just getting started." I walked away, leaving him standing alone by the bar. Across the room, I could see Vanessa watching us with growing alarm. She'd probably figured out that her husband wasn't the passive victim she'd thought he was. Mrs. Hawkins appeared at my side. "That was well done, dear. Sometimes people need to face consequences for their actions." "I couldn't agree more, Mrs. Hawkins. Though I think the consequences are just beginning." "Good. That woman never deserved you, and that man is a predator. The sooner everyone knows it, the better." As the evening wound down, I watched Vanessa and Blake leave together, but their body language had changed. They were no longer the confident couple who'd arrived earlier. Now they looked like what they were, two people who'd been caught doing something shameful. The third domino had fallen, and the rest were lined up perfectly. 3 days later, Detective March showed up at my workshop with a very serious expression and a notebook full of questions. He was a decent guy who'd gone to high school with me, but he took his job seriously and didn't let personal relationships interfere with investigations. "Eddie, I need to ask you some questions about Blake Rourke. Sure, Tom. What about him? He filed a complaint alleging harassment and stalking, says you've been following him, vandalizing his property, and threatening him. I set down the wrench I'd been using and gave him my full attention. That's a pretty serious accusation. What kind of evidence does he have? Photos of his slashed tires, the note you left on his windshield, witness statements about confrontations at the yacht club and the marina. Interesting. What did the witnesses say exactly? Tom consulted his notebook. That you publicly humiliated him at the yacht club, cost him a business deal, and threatened him at the marina. Did anyone mention that he's been sleeping with my wife for 4 months? That's not illegal, Eddie. Harassment and stalking are. You're right. Good thing I didn't harass or stalk anyone. So you deny slashing his tires? I deny nothing and admit nothing. But I will say that a man who parks in handicapped spaces probably makes a lot of enemies. Tom sighed. Eddie, I have to ask, where were you last Tuesday evening between 6 and 8 p.m.? That was when Blake claimed I'd slashed his tires. It was also when I'd been at Murphy's bar with Richie and half the construction crew from the marina project. Murphy's bar. Richie and I were buying drinks for the crew after we finished the Morrison yacht. Barb can confirm it, along with about 8 other people. What about the note on his windshield? What note? The one that said, "Stay away from what isn't yours." Sounds like good advice. Wish someone had given it to him sooner. Tom closed his notebook. Eddie, I know you're going through a rough time, but you need to be careful. Blake Rourke has money and connections. If he wants to make trouble for you, he can. Thanks for the warning, Tom. I'll keep that in mind. After he left, I called Richie and filled him in on the situation. Then I called Barb and asked her to make sure she remembered our conversation about Blake's history with married women. Finally, I made a call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my old comedy writing partner, who now worked as a private investigator in Boston. Danny, it's Eddie Masters. I need a favor. Eddie, how's married life treating you? Like a bad joke with a worse punchline. Listen, I need you to run a background check on someone. Blake Rourke, real estate developer in Harbor Bay. What kind of background check? The kind that might turn up other women, other complaints, other patterns of behavior that a small-town cop might not know about. Ah, the plot thickens. Give me his details. I provided everything I knew about Blake, including his business address and the name of his company. Danny promised to get back to me within 48 hours. That evening, Vanessa came home looking exhausted and defeated. She'd been staying late at the office, trying to salvage her career and avoid the gossip that followed her everywhere. Blake says you've been harassing him, she said without preamble. Blake says a lot of things. Most of them aren't true. Did you slash his tires? I was at Murphy's bar when his tires were slashed. Tom March already confirmed my alibi. She stared at me suspiciously. You're different, Eddie. You're not the man I married. You're right. The man you married was a fool who trusted his wife and believed in his marriage. That man died when he found out his wife was cheating on him. I never meant for it to happen this way. But you meant for it to happen. That's the part that kills me, Vanessa. This wasn't some accident or moment of weakness. You planned it, you lied about it, and you would have kept lying if I hadn't caught you. She sat down at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. What do you want from me, Eddie? What will it take to end this? I want you to face the consequences of your choices. I want Blake to face the consequences of his. And I want everyone in this town to know exactly who they're dealing with. And then what? Then we'll see what's left. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I loved you once, you know. I know. But love isn't enough when it's only going one direction. The next morning, Danny called with information that was even better than I'd hoped for. Your boy Blake has quite a history, he said. 3 harassment complaints in Boston, 2 in Portland, and 1 in Bar Harbor. All from married women. all alleging that he used business relationships to initiate affairs and then threatened their marriages when they tried to end things. Were any of the complaints substantiated? One resulted in a settlement. The others were dropped when the women refused to testify. Apparently, Blake's very good at making people afraid of the consequences of speaking out. What about criminal charges? Nothing that stuck, but there's a pattern here. This guy is a predator who specifically targets vulnerable married women. Danny, you're a lifesaver. Can you send me copies of everything? Already in your email. Good hunting, Eddie. I forwarded the information to Detective March with a note. Thought you might find this interesting given Blake's recent complaints about harassment. Seems like he has a history of accusing people when his behavior gets exposed. Then I sent copies to the local newspaper, the yacht club manager, and 3 of Blake's biggest potential clients. The 4th domino was about to fall, and it was going to make a very loud noise. The showdown happened at Murphy's Bar on a Friday night when the place was packed with locals. I'd been expecting it ever since Detective March had called to tell me that Blake's harassment complaint had been dropped due to credibility issues stemming from his history with other women. Blake stormed in around 9 p.m., his face red with anger and alcohol. He'd clearly been drinking somewhere else before deciding to confront me publicly. Mark was with him, probably hoping to watch me get beaten up by someone bigger and stronger. There he is, Blake announced loudly, pointing at me. The pathetic loser who can't accept that his wife doesn't want him anymore. The bar went quiet. Richie stood up from his stool, but I motioned for him to stay put. This was my fight, and I intended to win it without throwing a punch. Blake, I said calmly, you look upset. Rough week? You destroyed my business deal. You ruined my reputation. You turned the whole town against me. I just shared some information. What people did with that information was up to them. You sent my private history to everyone in town. Your history of harassing married women? Yeah. I thought people should know what kind of man they were dealing with. He stepped closer, his fists clenched. You want to know what kind of man I am? I'm the kind who takes what he wants, and I wanted your wife. Past tense? What? You said wanted, past tense. Does that mean you're done with her, or she's done with you? The question hit home. Blake's face got even redder, and I could see the truth in his eyes. Vanessa had probably distanced herself from him once the scandal broke, protecting her own interests over his. Your wife is a cheating whore, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. That's when I stood up. Not because he'd insulted Vanessa. She'd earned whatever insults came her way, but because he'd just given me exactly what I needed. You know what, Blake? You're absolutely right. My wife is a cheating whore. But what does that make you? The kind of man who sleeps with cheating whores. The crowd murmured appreciatively. I was playing to the room now, using the skills I'd learned as a comedian to control the narrative. And Mark here, I continued, gesturing to Vanessa's coworker. He's been circling around her like a vulture, waiting for his chance to sleep with a cheating whore too. So I guess that makes you both pretty pathetic. Mark's face went pale. That's not true. Really? Because I have text messages that suggest otherwise. Want me to share them with everyone, or should we keep this between us? I was bluffing, but Mark didn't know that. His guilty expression told everyone in the bar that there was truth to what I was saying. Blake took a swing at me then, a wild haymaker that telegraphed itself from across the room. I'd been in enough bar fights as a young comedian to know how to handle drunk bullies. I stepped aside, let his momentum carry him forward, and watched him crash into an empty table. You son of a bitch, he yelled, struggling to get up. Now, I said, helping him to his feet with exaggerated courtesy. No need for violence. We're all civilized people here. Barb appeared with a bar towel and started cleaning the beer that had spilled when Blake hit the table. Gentlemen, I think you've had enough excitement for one evening. You're right, Barb. Blake, Mark, I think you should leave. You're embarrassing yourselves. Blake straightened his shirt and tried to regain his dignity. This isn't over, Eddie. You're right. It's not over. It's just getting started. See, I've been thinking about writing again. Maybe a book about small-town scandals, cheating wives, and predatory real estate developers. I bet it would be a bestseller around here. The threat was clear. Blake could keep pushing, but every escalation would result in more public humiliation and exposure. He was smart enough to understand the math. "Come on, Mark," he said. "Let's get out of this dump." As they left, the bar erupted in conversation. Everyone wanted to know more details, more gossip, more drama. I bought a round for the house and let them speculate to their heart's content. Richie clapped me on the back. "That was beautiful, man. You destroyed him without laying a finger on him. Violence is for people who can't think of anything clever to say. What's next?" Now we wait for Vanessa to make her move. She's got to be feeling pretty isolated right about now, with Blake backing away and Mark exposed as an opportunist. Desperate people make desperate choices. And when she makes her desperate choice, that's when I spring the final trap. Vanessa's desperate choice came 2 weeks later, and it was even more foolish than I'd anticipated. She and Mark decided to frame me for domestic abuse, complete with fake bruises, manufactured evidence, and a tearful performance for Detective March. I knew it was coming because Mrs. Hawkins had seen Mark's car in our driveway at odd hours, and because Vanessa had suddenly started asking me questions about my schedule and whereabouts. She was building an alibi for herself while creating opportunities to stage evidence against me. The morning she planned to execute her scheme, I was ready. I'd installed hidden cameras in our house weeks earlier, small wireless devices that uploaded everything to a cloud server. Completely legal since it was my house too, and I'd made sure to avoid areas where she had a reasonable expectation of privacy. I watched from my phone as Vanessa used makeup to create fake bruises on her arms and face. I watched Mark help her stage our bedroom to look like there had been a struggle. I watched them practice her story, rehearsing the lies she would tell the police. Then I called Detective March myself. "Tom, it's Eddie. I need to report a crime in progress at my house." "What kind of crime?" "Fraud, filing a false police report, and conspiracy. My wife and her co-worker are currently staging evidence to make it look like I beat her up." "Eddie, that's a serious accusation. I have video evidence." "How fast can you get here?" 20 minutes later, Detective March arrived with backup just as Vanessa was calling 911 to report her assault. The timing was perfect. He could hear her making the false report while simultaneously watching the video, evidence of her staging the whole thing. Mark tried to run when he saw the police cars, but Richie had been waiting in the backyard for exactly that possibility. The little weasel ran straight into 250 pounds of angry boat mechanic. "Going somewhere, Mark?" Richie asked, pinning him against the fence. The arrest was almost anticlimactic. Vanessa tried to maintain her act even when confronted with video evidence, insisting that I must have somehow faked the footage. Mark, on the other hand, folded immediately and confessed to everything in exchange for a reduced charge. Detective March shook his head as he led them to the patrol cars. "Eddie, I've seen some stupid criminals in my time, but this takes the cake." What were they thinking? They were thinking that I was the same pushover I've always been. They didn't realize that people can change when they're pushed too far. Well, they're going to have plenty of time to think about it now. Filing a false police report is a felony, and conspiracy bumps it up even higher. As the police cars pulled away, I stood in my driveway and looked at the house that had been my prison for so many years. It felt different now, cleaner, somehow. Like a burden had been lifted. Mrs. Hawkins appeared at the fence between our properties. "I saw the whole thing, dear. Are you all right?" "I'm better than all right, Mrs. Hawkins. I'm free." "What will you do now?" "Now? Now I'm going to sell this house, take the money, and start over somewhere new. Maybe go back to comedy, maybe try something completely different. The world is full of possibilities when you're not tied down by people who don't appreciate you." And Vanessa? Vanessa made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. That evening, I sat in my workshop and opened a beer. My phone had been buzzing all day with calls from reporters, neighbors, and people who wanted to know more about the scandal. I'd ignored them all. The story would tell itself without any help from me. Blake had left town the day after our confrontation at Murphy's, probably moving on to some new community where his reputation hadn't preceded him. Mark was looking at jail time and the end of his career. Vanessa would be lucky to avoid prison, and even if she did, her professional and social life in Harbor Bay was over. I'd won completely and decisively, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the end of a long, exhausting performance where I'd finally remembered my lines. My phone rang. It was Danny, my old comedy writing partner. "Eddie, I just saw the news." "Holy shit, man, you really went nuclear on them." "Sometimes that's the only way to make sure the problem is solved permanently." "So what's next? You coming back to Boston? I could get you some gigs, help you get back into comedy." "Maybe. Or maybe I'll try something completely different. I've got time to figure it out." "Well, whatever you do, you should write a book about this. It's got everything: sex, betrayal, revenge, a satisfying ending where the bad guys get what they deserve." "You know what, Danny? That's not a bad idea. I think I will write a book." "What are you going to call it?" I looked around my workshop, at the tools and projects that had kept me sane during the worst period of my life. "I'm going to call it The Last Laugh When the Joke's on You." "Perfect. And Eddie?" "Yeah? I'm proud of you, man. You could have let them destroy you, but instead you turned it around and destroyed them. That takes balls." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet workshop and thought about the future. For the first time in years, it looked bright. Takas epilogue. 6 months later. I sold the house to a young couple from Portland who loved its Victorian character and didn't mind the gossip that came with it. The sale gave me enough money to buy a small place in Bar Harbor and start over completely. Vanessa pled guilty to filing a false police report and got 2 years probation plus community service. Mark got 6 months in jail and lost his job. Blake's real estate company went bankrupt after 3 more women came forward with harassment complaints. I did write the book, and Danny was right. It became a bestseller in Maine and attracted interest from publishers in New York. Turns out people love a good revenge story, especially when the revenge is creative and the bad guys really deserve what they get. I also went back to comedy, but with a different perspective. My new material about marriage, betrayal, and small-town justice killed audiences up and down the coast. There's nothing funnier than the truth, especially when it's wrapped in a story about people getting exactly what they deserve. Mrs. Hawkins sends me Christmas cards and updates about the neighborhood. Apparently, the new owners of my old house are very happy and haven't had any drama at all. She says it's much more peaceful without all the shouting and cheating and police cars. I never saw Vanessa again after the trial, but I heard she moved to Florida and got a job selling timeshares. It seems fitting somehow. She always was good at convincing people to buy things they didn't really want. The best part of the whole experience was learning that I didn't need anyone else's approval or love to be happy. I'd spent so many years trying to be the man Vanessa wanted, trying to win back her affection, trying to save a marriage that was already dead. Once I stopped trying and started fighting back, everything changed. These days, I wake up in my small house overlooking the ocean, make coffee without worrying about anyone else's schedule, and spend my days writing jokes about the absurdity of human nature. It's a good life, a honest life, and it's entirely mine. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how things ended, if I wish I'd handled the situation differently. The answer is always no. Vanessa, Mark, and Blake made their choices, and I made mine. They chose deception, betrayal, and cruelty. I chose truth, justice, and consequences. In the end, the joke really was on them.